Alrighty, I think we're good. Looks like I have audio levels, which is nice. I'm checking the indicators there. Happy Monday, everybody. I know, Monday's a bad word to some people, but not always to everybody, and not to me. I mean, every day could be Monday to me, or it could be Friday, or it could be, when you're retired, they're all kind of pretty much the same. So, let me just get things squared away here, check audios, everything's good, and I just have to line up my windows here. My name is Jeff, and you're in my workshop. So this is JR's wood shop here, and I make stuff usually for sewing machine bases or sewing machines and stuff. It's a weird little, not everybody does that, but it's full of like good old-fashioned woodworking, and it helps me to pay for some toys and tools and such. So that's what I like to do, and as I make those things, I kind of share the process with you all, and hopefully there's some stuff in there that you might be able to relate to something that you're making. Like I said, usually I'm making making kind of a simple, like, hey, you need an apple box? You know what an apple box is? It's like a little box that you used to be, you would put apples in them, but the term turned into things that like photographers use in studios or whatever, where people can put a foot up on one and they can sit on them, you can stack them. Anyway, you can make them the same way that I make these. It's really simple construction. Although I kind of start dressing mine up and making them look a little bit nicer before, so they're not just simple boxes. Mine get things carved in there and logos and stuff to look really pretty. I use different species of wood. This is cherry. I've got some oak. I've got some walnut. I've got some sycamore. So I use different species of wood. And that helps to kind of dress things up and make them a little bit more special than just a regular box. I also finish them, sand them, round corners, do a lot of different things to them. So they turn out looking really nice when they're done. And then I can sell them, and then I can buy more tools and toys and lumber and things like that. So it kind of helps me just to keep myself in supplies and stuff like that. Plus it feeds my other hobbies and such. So like I've been upgrading my mountain bike, and it paid for a lot of the upgrades for my mountain bike, and I might be buying another bike soon, and it might pay for that. I know you can only ride one bike at a time, but there's different kinds of bikes for different things. So this would be a different thing. I have a hardtail, if you don't know what that is. It has a shock in the front, but no shock in the back. It's a regular suspension, a regular tire just mounted to the frame in the back. But I might get a full suspension, which has a shock for the back and shocks for the front. It's a little more cushy and made for more of rough trails and jumps and things like that. So I might get one of those soon. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. I actually just got back on my bike yesterday for a little while. It had been a couple of months since I'd ridden. Just there was an injury and I had to get better with that. And then I was upgrading the bike, and then the weather has been ridiculously horrible. Not bike riding weather. It's like you'd had to go out and ride at like 8 o'clock at night or like 5 o'clock in the morning. Neither of those agreed with my timetables. So I haven't been on the bike in a while, but yesterday was pretty darn nice. We had some front come through, cooled things off. The humidity dropped way down. It's actually not bad in my shop now. It's only like 77 degrees in my shop right now, which is wonderful. I'll take that any day of the week. Because usually for the past weeks, it's been, in the mid 80s in my shop and humidity and stuff. So I am gladly taking this little bit cooler weather, and I'm happy with that. This past weekend, what did I do in the shop? Let's see. So when we left on Friday, I had just finished doing all of the corner pieces, the little triangular pieces that go in the corners of the bases to hold the machines up. I'll show you one in a minute, in case you don't know what I mean. But I'd finished the corner pieces, and then I showed how I glue them in So I think I glued in 1 or 2 of them on stream. Once you've seen one glued, you've seen them all glued. There's no difference in the process. So I did not film the gluing of all of them, just a couple of them, because there's 2 different ways to do it, because I've got 2 different style of bases here. And so it's 2 different techniques for gluing them. But this weekend I finished gluing all of them because I don't have like 100 clamps to do this. So the number of clamps that I have, I can usually do 3 pretty easily without getting creative with clamping. So I did 3 of them at a time, and then I let them let the glue cure for several hours. And then I took the clamps off and moved and did the others. So I got all of them clamped and finished, which means we're really almost in a state of ready to finish these things. There's one last step that needs to be done. So this is the base right here. Let me turn it around so you get the front view, because, you know, it's pretty. It has a logo on there and stuff. It's much prettier. This is a walnut base. So you can see this one right here has a side storage compartment. So there's the main compartment here, which I've got a machine right here. Hang on. So there's the sewing machine, which goes in the main compartment like this. And then there's a side storage compartment that you can store knickknacks and doodads and things of that nature. And really, there's only 2 things left to do to this. Well, I call it 2 things. One of them is a combination of some stuff. But anyway, 2 things left to do. One is to round these corners off, and these get a pretty heavy roundover. It's about a 1-inch roundover on the corners, so that these sharp edges are all rounded on front and back. So that's the big main thing left to do in terms of any cutting and, you know, construction type stuff. The final step beyond that is what I call finishing. I call that one step. It's actually a couple of different things. So finishing is, like for this particular one, finishing will be a sanding up to a couple of grits, and then a really, really gentle roundover. I've got an 1/8-inch roundover bit that I put on all the edges, that like these corners right here and along the inside of the base here. It just makes it feel nice in your hand, and then along the finger grips on the side, because it does have handles on the side here. You can see the handles right there. So right now they're kind of sharp edges, but I break all those edges with like an 1/8-inch roundover. Well, except the handles, it won't fit in there, but I do that by hand. So for finishing, it's sanding, roundovers, and then putting the final finish on, whether it be an oil or a stain, whatever that would be, and then a lacquer on top of all of that. So things like walnut will get an oil finish to them, because I just like the way that walnut looks with an oil finish on there. So probably for these, it'll get a Danish oil, Danish, you know what I'm trying to say, Danish oil, yeah. I'll put a Danish oil on the walnut, which makes them look beautiful after they've been sanded and roundovered. And then I have to let that cure for about a week before I can start lacquering. I can't put, you don't want to put lacquer over top of an oil finish until it is fully cured out, because it could interfere with the lacquer and you get really uneven and bad areas of lacquer on there. So I let those fully cure. Something like this, which is cherry, will get, and these are really almost done, but these will get the roundover, the big roundover today. And then this is just a matter of sanding, a little 1/8-inch roundover all around the edges, you know, smooth out the handles. And then this gets a stain. This gets a regular wood stain. I use a dark Kona stain on this stuff to give these a really nice dark brown color. And then the stain usually takes a couple of days before I can start lacquering. After the stain has been applied and wiped off and everything, I let them sit for a couple of days, depending on the weather and humidity. And then I will put lacquer over top of those. This is the oak. Now this is quarter sawn red oak. And so this is perplexing me just a little bit, because I'm trying to figure out exactly what finish I want to apply on these. And I done some different testing. I had this on the stream the other day where I did some sample, whoops, hang on a second. I'm dropping my sample blocks here. So I did some sample blocks with some different stains on them and such. This is a very open grain wood. Let me turn my other camera on here. And that open grain wood kind of works by sucking up the grain, and you'll see a lot of stripes in here and such. Let me get these two right here. So I think this camera's on now. So there you go. So these are some different stains applied on here. Let's see what I got here. So Jacobine, and this is the red mahogany. And then I had espresso and dark walnut, which between the two of those, I'm kind of surprised the dark walnut actually darker than the espresso. But anyway, so that was just kind of like, oh, let me see what that looks like. And you can see it's got a little bit of a sheen to it. That's because I put some lacquer over top of these, because you never really know how a finish is going to look until you put that final top coat on there, because it can change the way it looks. Anyway, I was like, oh, well, let me try. I like the dark walnut color. So I did this thing where I did some pore filler on here, which you can see the color not as dark with the pore filler because it doesn't allow the stain to penetrate as deeply. But I also didn't want it to get into these pores as much. And it gives a smoother feel to the wood. But that was the dark walnut. It's okay. And you can see the reason I love this stuff is you see all these kind of curved lines in here. Those are medullary rays that you get in, especially in quarter sawn oaks, white oak, red oak. I'm not sure about live oak, but when you quarter saw a piece of wood like this, you get these medullary rays. I don't know if they show up in other types of wood. Possibly they do. You do get different effects in the wood when you quarter saw it. But anyway, I was like, well, that looks pretty cool. That's not bad. You can really see, like I said, you can really see those medullary rays sticking out there, which I love the medullary rays. But then I was like, well, let me try this other method that I use for white oak. White oak's a little different. It's not quite as open pored as this. And so this is a two-step process. And I'm trying to get it so that it's light enough. There you go. So this is a two-step process. This uses a golden oak dye stain, or golden maple dye stain, I think is what it is. And then on top of that is a stain called gunstock, which is a regular stain that you apply over top of the dye stain. And so you can see where the medullary rays are much lighter because they don't soak up anything. They're a little bit yellowish or golden because of that, the dye stain. And then the gunstock fills in all the rest of the darker stuff, right? But this, to me, is a little too, I don't know, it's a little too golden, a little yellowish for me. So I was like, well, this weekend I was like, well, I really like this, but let me try. I wish I could do it maybe a little bit darker. So what I did was I took some of my Kona stain. I did the same maple process. And, oh, and this right here is maple gel stain. This is what I use for the regular white oak bases. I use this, and it looks really cool on there. But it was a little lighter than I wanted. I want something a little darker than that. I did the Kona over top of the golden maple dye stain, but it is just a little too dark. I like it. It's dark, but it's just a little too dark for me. You can still see the medullary rays and stuff, but I think the Kona was just a little too dark. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go maybe this afternoon to, I don't know, I'll just go to Home Depot. It really, you know, it's not going to require a special trip to go somewhere. I just want to get like a nice medium brown stain instead of something this dark. The Kona is very dark. And instead of the very dark, the gunstock that I use for this, I think is a little light. I want something in between, a brown that's in between, like a medium brown, in between the dark Kona and the gunstock, something kind of just an in-between. And I think that might actually give me the exact look I'm going for on this particular stuff. The other ones I've got are the sycamore, and this is quarter sawn sycamore. So you get some very interesting grain with quarter sawn sycamore. So if you look at this one, look at the kind of funky, cool grain pattern you get in there. That's really nice. But this stuff doesn't stain very well. It does not stain well at all, and it's a lot of it's because of that quarter sawn pattern there. It looks very much like leopard wood or something like that, but it soaks in really unevenly. And I was looking to see, I had a piece here that I had done, and I can't find it. I don't know if it fell somewhere or I knocked it off, or I was looking for it and I can't find the piece that I stained. Not that I was going to use it. I just had a sample piece. Oh, here it is. So I had a sample piece that I stained, and I tried putting a couple coats of lacquer on there, but it does not feel wonderful. But anyway, I never got anything that looked decent. So you can see here, it's just kind of like bleh. And this was like a dark stain, and it just went bleh. This was actually a dye stain. I was like, well, let me try a dye stain, but it's so blotchy, right? So this is what it looks like with natural stains on them. Don't mind this. This is actually in the grain itself. This is just the way the wood is. But I think what I'm going to do is just do a nice natural. So like this is a, I have them labeled here. I think this is the Danish oil, like a dark walnut. This is a cherry Danish oil. So not too bad. Got a little color to it. I might do the cherry Danish oil on there. This is basically just tung oil, so very, very subtle, but you get to see all of the nice, beautiful wood grain in there. And then this all has lacquer over top, and this was just shellac with then lacquer applied over top of that. So you can see it's got a little sheen to it, but color-wise, you can see that you get much more of the beauty of the grain in there without going crazy. The cherry's not bad. There's a dark walnut, and I might pick up some light. I think they have a light or a medium walnut. Maybe not as bad. This gets a little bit splotchy in some of the areas. So maybe something with a little bit lighter pigment like this right over here. But anyway, so this will get a much more natural finish to it. I don't want to go crazy on it. If I could find something that was dark and looked really good, I would do that, but I have yet to find anything, especially with the quarter sawn stuff, that really kind of floats my boat. So that's where we're standing. So I think what I'm going to do is, like I said, this afternoon I may see if I can find just a medium brown for this oak stuff right here, and which you can see that's really dark with the espresso. This one right here, hold it up with the gun stock, and you can see, hopefully you can see, the gun stock much lighter, but let me give you the other camera here. So the gun stock a little bit lighter, but it's got a little bit of kind of a yellowish reddish hue to it, and I think I want to go a little bit more brown with those little, with the golden stuff kind of coming through. The thing about the oak is that where those medullary rays are, that are kind of coming down this way, they don't soak up very much stain at all. And that's why when you use a top coat of stain over top of the dye, that top coat of stain can't soak in. So when you wipe off the stain, it only stays in the open pore areas, and then you get to see those medullary rays kind of pop a little bit more with that golden color on top of them. But I'm still not crazy about the dark stuff. So I might get a medium brown and try that. I've got these little sample pieces here that I can try. And that's why I kind of keep them set here so that I can use those as samples. I can always, if I don't like it, I can plane it off or put it on my jointer, take off a layer, resand it and try again, which is usually what I do. But yeah, so anyway, let me get this out of the way, because today we're not going to be finishing these. Not finishing today. Today what we're doing is rounding the corners. We're going to round that final corner, coming in to the home stretch, rounding the final corner. And what that means is that we're going to take this and put this on the table over here, on the router table, and we are going to use a very, very aggressive roundover bit to put that rounded profile on the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move stuff off to the side here. We're going to work over here, and And I think I've got my roundover bit here. I do have the roundover bit here. Okay, this is the roundover bit that I'm going to use. So I'll bring it over here so you can see it a little bit better. So here's the roundover bit, and you can see that very aggressive rounding profile on there, right? And we're going to set that up in the router. So I need to take the top off of here. And then we need to jack this thing up. There's already a bit in here, and I have to change the collet as well because I have a 1/4 inch collet in there. And this, you can see, that's a very beefy shaft on this thing, right? And just due to the fact that you're going to be cutting so much wood, you really need a large shaft, which requires a larger collet. So like this one right here is like a 1/4 inch roundover, and you can see you can get away with a 1/4 inch shank on here because you're not, there you go, you can see you're not being as aggressive, you're not taking that much wood. But when you're cutting a lot of wood, you really want a big beefy shaft on there so that it minimizes any of the vibrations and such that you get as that is cutting the wood. So anyway, let's go ahead and take this off. This is my rabbiting bit that I use for doing the base bottoms and for the whatchamacallit, the lids for the storage compartment. But anyway, just take this 1/4 inch collet off of here, and I have a 1/2 inch collet that I will put in its place. Hang on, before I do that, I'm just going to vacuum this space out a little bit because it's a little dusty. All right, put the 1/2 inch collet on here. Put this in. Now this shaft is bottoming out. I like to lift it up a little bit for a couple of reasons. One, I know that I get a really good bite with the collet. And the other thing is that because I'm working through a tabletop here, it's a little thicker than a router plate. And it just gives me that little extra height when I am setting this up. So the other thing I need is a plate that will go over top of this and allow enough clearance for the blade to go through. Oh, you know what I really don't like about summer is that in my shop, it means that it's spider season. Oops, see, that's too small. I get all these teeny, tiny little spiders. And every morning when I come out to my shop, it is like, they're very industrious because there's cobwebs like every single morning when I come out here. Like everywhere. It's kind of, I just walk spending the first half hour in the shop going and wiping them off myself. Okay, I've got this set up in the table and I need to establish how high this is going to be. I want this to be to the point where it's just, the curve is just under the edge. And the way that I do that is I take a board with a very flat bottom and then I lower this down until it just slides up that edge. Because you don't want it hitting, let me turn it this way so you can see. You don't want it hitting that board right there. You just want it to, there you go. So it slides up the side now. What that means is that little front edge is not going to create a line or a groove in my project. That's very important. You don't want that. Get some of this scrap wood out of the way. Now, one thing that I do when I'm making these bases is, in order to eliminate any blowout, there's a couple things I do. One is this part where I get it perfectly lined up there. The other is that I clamp a board to the outside of the base. So a board will get clamped to that outside. What that board does is it gives support to these wood fibers right here. If I didn't do this, these wood fibers right here, as that blade gets over to this part, there's nothing supporting them and they'll just blow out. I'll get tons of tear out over here. If I clamp a board right against here, now there's going to be support against this. Now, these have already been used, so you can see how these have round corners on them. Like right here, that's rounded, and this profile right here is rounded. Let me show you, let me get up close and personal so you can see that. So you can see how these have these rounded profiles on them. That's because these have already been used for clamping purposes. But the nice thing is I can just keep chopping these off and get straight edges and then just use them again. And that's what I'm going to do with these. I've got a couple of them that I use for this. I will show you. There's one. All right. So I've got all of these basically just spare wood. And I will cut the corners off of them and then use these as supports for the corners so I don't get blowout. And the other thing I do to minimize that is I take basically 2 passes. I'll take a light pass across and then I'll go to a full pass. A full pass is when this is interacting with that bearing right there. That bearing minimizes how deep the cut goes. But I don't go the full depth. I'll go about halfway across and then I go the rest of the way. I don't want to just remove that much wood that quickly. It doesn't lead to good things, I'm just saying. All right, first thing I'm going to do over here, I'm going to come over to my saw. You're like, where? I don't see you. Hang on a second. I think I've got a camera set up over here. So I'm going to come over here to this saw and just cut these edges off of these because they need to be square when I clamp them to the bases. So I'm just going to set them over here. I'm just going to grab a couple of them and we're just going to chop the edges off, make them nice and clean. This one's actually good to go, I think. But you know what? I'm going to make it nice and square because it's got a rough end, so that may not be square. Let me grab some hearing protection. I've got my thing. Oh, yeah, we're good to go. All right, let's go ahead and just get these cut off here and do that. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these things cut down. I probably will have to come back at some point in time and trim, because I've got 8 bases. So obviously 5 of them is not enough, but that's okay because I can always come back, trim off the edges on a couple of them and reuse them, which is what we're going to be doing here. We're just reusing these for the same purpose. It's kind of why I just keep them. I'm going to bring my, my dust hose up here, and I'm just going to have that kind of pulling pulling some of the dust debris back this way towards the fan here. So this is all set up. Let me just check this edge real quick here. So that feels good. Now the other thing I need to make sure, and I should have done this already, but these should be nice and flat across here. So there's the seam right here, which is this end piece. You can see a little bit right here, and then the flat piece on the side. This should have been flattened, and I'm going to check it just to make sure before I run these through. This one's fine. Because if you don't, then what happens is it tips it up a little bit, and you're not going to get a nice straight cut across there. It'll be a little bit janky. We don't want janky. Janky's not good. The other thing I need to do is move the power over here so that we have power to our router table. So I'll plug that in. Let's see, which I would, even if I had power over there, I would have unplugged it just because I don't like to change bits with the power plugged in. It's like I have to reach all the way under and turn my machine on. There's not like a switch here I could accidentally hit, but you know what? It's just good safety practice, and there's nothing wrong with a little extra safety precaution here. Okay, so for this guy right here, we need to do, and the nice thing is when I've got a block like this, I can get all four corners of the base rounded over using one block. I just keep rotating the block to a fresh edge. So there's 4 corners of the box, there's 4 corners of this support. So I just keep flipping it over, and that's all I need to do. I do need a clamp. So I'm just going to get a quick clamp here, just one of these quick clamps. They're really easy. I line up my piece of wood so that it is right in the corner. I'm just going to clamp it down like this. And what I'm looking at is right here, as that blade comes across, I want this piece of wood right here. If anything's going to get blown out, it's this piece of wood, not this, because all this fiber right here is now supported by this block of wood. So any blowout will happen on here, not here. And I say this through experience because I have blown out before, and it's not fun. When you get this far in, if you blow out a corner, you're kind of going to have to just throw the block or throw the base away, because there's not really any way to fix a huge blowout like that. Oh, and if I didn't mention, I've got chat windows on all the different platforms, and Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. So I try to keep track and look at them periodically to make sure that if there's anybody in here with questions or comments or whatever, that I acknowledge you and can answer them or whatever. So if you want to throw a comment or a question or whatever in there, a salutation, feel free. Like I said, when I'm working with the tools, I'm not paying close attention, but I try to check it periodically just to make sure I'm keeping track. Speaking of keeping track, before I cut this, I'm going to run out of the screen for just a minute. I have to go do something real quick in the house. Give me one moment. I will be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I had to go inside and remind my son about something. So, and then I had to also grab a beverage because it's a little dusty. Okay. Ah, much better. Much better. All right. So what do we got here? We've got our support is clamped into the base here. We've got our dust collection kind of pointing in that direction. And all it's needed now are my ears and turn this thing on. The other thing is, because this is a large bit, I will probably turn the speed down on the router just a little bit. The larger the bit, the slower the RPM you want to use. So it doesn't have to be super slow, like not the slowest setting, but you don't want it at the highest revolutions either. So before I get motoring on with the rest of them, I just want to show you what that looks like. And you can see that as it does that roundover, it's very nice. Let me get a little closer here so you can see it. So that's the roundover that we're after. It's a pretty aggressive roundover when you look at the other corner, and you can see how much that roundover does. But it looks really nice. And I think it's just, like I said, it's just one of those added touches when you're doing something that makes a big difference. You can also see this is the rounded over section. It now has a roundover on that corner. So what we'll do is we'll just flip this over, use a different corner, and clamp it in. But no blowout at all, and that's the key right there. All right, so when I do this, I'm just gonna plow through these now. I'm not gonna stop and comment on anything. I will just cut these last 3 corners, so you'll see me switching. I'll cut the corners, and then we'll move on to the next one. All right, that is the end of that. Now, let me show you a little bit what I'm talking about. Is this was not too bad, but you can see that right here, all these fibers and stuff kicking out, that's all blowout that I get on the sacrificial piece. And that's why, once again, you use the sacrificial piece, because then it leaves a nice clean corner on the base. So that's basically what we're gonna do there. See how those are all rounded over now? They look really nice. And it's the same process for all the bases now. So I'm gonna set this one aside. Just gives me a place to stack it for the moment and move on to them. It doesn't really matter which piece of wood I'm doing here. They all get the same treatment. So it's just a matter of getting my board in place, getting the clamp on there, and then doing what I need to do. But the big thing is getting that down at the bottom down here. I don't care if it lines up here at the top. This is where I care, right down here at the bottom. Ah, see, I just moved it. It just moved out of the way. So it needs to line up perfectly with this edge right here. Because the whole point is to support that edge during the cutting process. I'm having trouble with this one. There we go. For whatever reason, it just wanted to slide. All right, here we go. Just keep going. So the one thing I have found is that, especially with the like cherry, is that cherry burns really easily. If that bit stays in one place too long, you just get black marks. And you can see there's just a little bit on the corner here, a little bit up here. Usually where I start, because I guide it in slowly and then I have to go across, but I try to keep it moving. I try not to pause anywhere. And if you do that, if you keep it moving and you go at a pretty good pace, like I'm not zipping it through, but at a nice, steady, even pace, it does tend to minimize that. You can see like on this end, see that black right on there? That's all burning that happened. This is a piece of cherry. And that all happens because that bit sits there a little bit long and then it starts to basically burn the wood. But like I said, that's not a problem if I have the burning on the sacrificial piece. So let's see, this one. Let's see, let's grab another base here. We're back to another piece of oak. Alrighty. So that is number 3 done. These are really nice corners, really little burning on these. I'm getting a nice even round corner on here, and that's really what I'm after, is just a really nice rounded profile. Yep, they look splendid. All right, should have one more shorty. Oh, here it is. One more short one here. And this is the sycamore. So we will this through the paste. And sycamore is a really easy cutting wood, so this really, I don't anticipate any problems with the sycamore. And that's about the time when I say that things go wrong, so hopefully not. Let's see. Ah. The only thing I don't like about the sycamore base is that this is a thinner profile. This is only about 2.5 inches. The other ones are 3 inches. So when you're putting it through here, it's not as stable. The wider the wider the base, like this, the wider the base, the more stable it is on the table. The thinner they get, the more tippy they can get. So, and because you're using a blade that wants to catch and wants to pull and tear and do horrible things, you know. It's just a little bit more nervous pushing this through, but still it works. You know, just take your time. That looks really nice. All my seams are really nice in there. So another one done. All right, that's all the shorties. We can now move up to the full-size bases, which 1, 2, 3. Oh, the computer said, I'm like, well, I have 4 of these. Where's the 4th one? It's right here. It was underneath. All right, this is my last support, my last sacrificial piece. So I will be cutting the ends off of these, of 3 of these anyway, when we get started here. So we'll have to go back to the table over here, cut 3 of these down, and then finish up the rest of these. But we can get started with this one. I just took the lid off because, well, I don't want it to fall out and get broken. But let's get this piece on here. Get the fuzz off of here so it fits nice and flat. You can see these like numbers on here. I try different things and I usually label them like for staining and stuff. Like this one I was experimenting on, does the amount that you sand, like the fineness of the grit, have an effect on the darkness of the stain, which it does to some effect actually. All right, let's get this one done. So just to kind of contrast between them, I can show you that. So this is the rounded corner. This is one with the square corners. Whoops. Well, that's what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to dump that out. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that, to me, anyway, the square corner just does not look as finished and elegant as the rounded corners. So that's why I do those roundovers on there. They just, to me, they just look nicer. They're more pleasant to the hand, to the touch. You're not going to catch, and these are very sharp corners anyway. So I just find these to be a much more, say pleasant, but well, pleasant to touch, pleasant to look at. I just think they're better. Just more better. But what's not better is the fact that I don't have any more sacrificial boards. So we have to go back over to the saw, and we're going to chop off a little bit of wood here on 3 of these so we can finish these up. And this is a pretty straightforward process. There's not a lot to it, except I have a lot of sawdust on my ground here. But anyway, let me get 3. Let's see, I will take this one, and we'll just do this one. We'll cut these 3 off. That'll be enough. And I need to turn my stuff on here. We'll put the camera over here for you so you can just see me doing this part. Sorry, I had to clean up a little bit of that dust. You know who loves the sawdust? The spiders love the sawdust. So that had to go. Had to go. All right, I've got new sacrificial edges cut. And I'm just gonna hit them a little bit with the sandpaper just to make sure they rest flat on the tabletop surface here. So they should, without too much issue. Okay, and there we go. All right, like I said, all I need is square corners, so there's not a lot of complicated stuff going on there. And let me just get a quick dousing of liquids here. Oh, that's much better. Wash down all that good sawdust. All right, let's get the rest of these cut. There's only 3 left. They should go pretty quickly. Excuse me. And then we can move on. Got to figure out what I'm going to do next. I mean, really, from this point, it's just a matter of checking the edges for flatness, doing some sanding, and doing the roundovers. And then these puppies are ready for finish. It's kind of amazing how fast sometimes you think you're further behind, but when you get down to it, sometimes it goes pretty quick. All right. Speaking of going pretty quick, I need power. We're not going to go very quickly without it. So let me grab some power here, plug in, and then get these done. All right. Now we're good to go. Let's get it. Oh, wait. I need my remote. So the other thing about doing these, you can run them through, like I could run them through tall, or I can run them through like flat like this. It doesn't matter because it's an equal distant roundover on all the sides. So it doesn't really matter which way they are facing when you send them through. This one's done, by the way. Moving on. All right, one more to go, and we will be done with the roundovers. What time is it? Dang, 12 o'clock, and we're finished roundovers. That's nice. That's a nice, very nice for me. Okay, I won't do that again, I promise. All right, this is the last one here. It's the sycamore. It's clamped down. Okay. All right, that is that. There's the, it's like this. Maybe? There we go. So there's the sycamore. You can see it's kind of got a cool patch right there and stuff. And it's got its roundovers now. And yeah, done. I'm going to lower this down. Actually, you know what I might do? Let me unplug, and then I'm going to just take that bit out of there and then put the flat top on here so I can use this as a tabletop kind of thing. So unlock the ring, raise this up. When you have it raised all the way up, it locks the collet in place, so it makes it easier to remove. Get rid of that clamp there. Get my wrench. And I probably will not use that large collet again, so I'm going to put the small one on there just so I can be ready for the next time I need to use this. And then we will lower this down below the table level, like that. And let me grab the flat top. There we go. So now it's a nice flat surface here. I don't have to worry about things falling down inside there or anything else. And I can stack stuff up there. Okay. I can take these ears off my head. That would be, whew, that feels good. I'm going to move these back over to here. So we have Um, oh, 4 regular sized and 4 with the side cabinets or side storage compartments. Be better. It'd be better if I got a haircut because this stuff's just all over the place. And I didn't want to wear a hat today, so you just get messy head. You get messy head Jeff today. Should probably put this over here because this is waterproof. Where's my workbench? Not quite as much. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at one of these real quick and just see where we're at here, what we need to do to finish these up. All right, because we're rounded the corner. We're in the home stretch. The thing that I'm going to need, actually, it was a good thing I changed that bit out because we are going to have to do that little 1/8 inch roundover, but that's getting ahead of myself here. The thing this needs now is 2 things kind of moving forward. I want to make sure that this top is really flat, just kind of any areas up here that could be leveled off. Like there's a little bit of glue here sticking up and stuff. I just want to make sure that these are nice and level and flat so that when we get ready to sanding, we're just sanding the wood, not trying to take down things. So I can come here with my plane and just kind of make sure that these are nice and squared and even there. And this plane is, you know, it's a little block plane, but because it's so small, it's almost like a smoothing plane. And then I can just find these levels where they're, I'm trying not to interfere with anything on here. I don't want to chip out. That's the other thing. I do not want to chip anything out here. But I do have a little bit of glue right there. I want to get rid of that. I'm cutting across here, so I need to make sure that I'm not doing damage to any of these corners here. So we're just going to clean this up. So I'm just kind of cleaning up these edges with this block plane. And making sure that I've got any nasty like glue and stuff like that cleaned up out of them. Because the next step we're going to be hitting on is the, we're going to be doing some sanding. I know you are way excited about that sanding part, aren't you? As am I, because, you know, who doesn't love adventures in sanding? Ooh, that is really sharp because that is super smooth. Now, when I sand these, like this this has not been sanded at all. So this is straight off the jointer face or the planer face when I get to sanding these. And I'm gonna dump that out there. When I go to sand these, depending on the planer marks I have in here, any amounts of chip out or anything else, especially with this stuff, is a little bit chippy because of just the nature of the wood grain. It's going to have a bearing on which grit I start with. This is pretty rough. So I think for this particular base, what I would do is start with probably an 80 grit sandpaper. So like I've got an 80 grit here. This is a what they call a sand net. So you can actually see through it, which just allows for really good dust extraction and such in here. It keeps from getting, of course, when you throw it off the front of your table, it doesn't work as well. But it keeps it from getting clogged up. And, oh, pardon me for just flashing my fanny in your face there. But anyway, it keeps it from getting clogged up and such. This is, I just got a question. Is that a Stanley block plane? This is a small Stanley. So a little bevel up block plane. So I keep this pretty sharp. I like to use this one quite a bit. I have this one that I have no idea what it is. It basically is modeled off of the Stanley. Almost the exact same mechanics and everything. But this was my grandfather's plane, so it's kind of cool. I don't use it a lot. I just got this recently from my brother, gave this to me. But yeah, just a simple Stanley block plane. 25 degrees is the angle that this is ground to. And I mean, you can change the angle yourself. I wouldn't. I would go with the original angle because grinding these down to a new angle is a monumental task. But this one is at 25 degrees. And so you're mostly listening. The person on Twitch who's commenting, if you are on Facebook and YouTube and you don't like who I'm talking to, you can hear while you mow. That's good stuff. See, that's where I would use. I've got the IsoTunes headphones with Bluetooth, so I could actually do the same thing. But yeah, so I'm using just to kind of clean up any little marks. Because it has such a short sole on it, on the plane, it actually follows the wood grain along much better as opposed to my longer my 64 or my number 5 or whatever, much longer sole. So it's great for flattening, but not great for smoothing. So the block plane is nice for just getting little imperfections out and stuff. And it's a 25 degree angle. This is a bevel up. A lot of block planes, or a lot of planes themselves, actually have the bevel of the blade down, and then the flat part of the iron is faced up. But this is a bevel up plane, so it's kind of nice that way. I like bevel up planes. My all-time favorite plane is a number 62. It's a bevel up low angle jack plane, and it is also at 25 degrees. And super smooth cuts on this. This is my favorite plane of all time, but this one's made by Wood River, but it's based on the number 62 by Stanley. So I think Stanley pretty much wrote the book on at least cast iron planes, metal planes. There's a lot of planes out there, but Stanley are the historical design trendsetters. There's a lot of companies that have come along and make really super nice planes now, like Veritas and stuff like that. But most of them are using designs that kind of came out of the Stanley planes. So, so they're pretty cool. I also have a Bailey. I have a number 5 Bailey, which was sort of, I think they kind of merged with Stanley at some point. But it's a pretty cool plane as well. So yeah, now what I need to do, so I've got those sides all squared up around the top. They feel nice and flat and even. And really the only thing left to do is to sand this thing. So like I said, I'll start with an 80 on this because it's kind of rough. I've got a little bit of chipping from the grain here. I'll start with an 80, which is the sand net stuff. It's that mesh netting type stuff. And then from the 80, I'll go to a 120, a 150, and then a 220. And those are my basic those are my basic sanding grit that I use. Sometimes I'll just start at the 120 and then go from there. But this one's a little bit more rough. And so I think probably to give myself the best finish possible, I'll start with that 80, get this down nice and flat and smooth with the 80, and then just work my way up. And then really all I'm doing is taking out the scratch marks from each progressive fineness in sandpaper that I'm using. The one thing I like to do on my projects when I'm sanding them is I'll take a pencil and I will mark just a line on the surface that I'm sanding. And what that does is, as you sand that line away, that pencil line away, it pretty much is taking away all of the imperfections in the wood as well. So when you get that pencil pretty much removed, you know you're pretty safe to move on to the next grit. And then you mark it with pencil again and you start with that grit. And the kind of the thought process behind that is the pencil, lead will fall down into those deeper cracks. So it requires more sanding in the early stages. As it gets smoother and smoother, the lead is sitting on top of the wood more and more, so it takes less sanding with the finer grits to remove the stuff. So really your longest sanding is with the heavy grit, and then as you move to the fine stuff, it doesn't require as much sanding. And that's a pretty good way of doing it. Oh Lord, my son's sending me a text message. That never is good. The person at CarMax near us was incorrect, and I cannot get another temporary tag, so I just have to keep it. You know, everybody's out to make things harder in life, I think. I think it's just set back to mowing. Oh, Lee Nielsen is a very nice, as I said, there's some really nice stuff out there. Veritas and Lee Nielsen, that's top-notch stuff. I don't have a Lee Nielsen. I have some Veritas stuff, but yeah, Lee Nielsen's really, I covet Lee Nielsen stuff. Anyway, yeah, this is going to be not very exciting for you if you're just listening, because I am going to start sanding this one piece here. And you're not going to hear a whole lot because my noise canceling software is going to take over, and it won't sound like a whole lot. It's not actually very visually stimulating either, but probably more so than just listening. So when you hear that, that kind of vacant noise or a little humming chirp, that's me doing this with the sander. Just using my, my little rotary, oscillating sander. And like I said, the reason I like to sand that stuff, especially for the coarse ones, is that it does clear the sawdust out really well. Okay, I have my dust collection hooked up to that. I need to hook up power to the saw, or not to the saw, to the sander, which is down here. And then we can get on with this nonsense. I will say that this is getting to my least favorite part of any project. It's the most satisfying. In terms of, seeing it kind of come to life and bringing out the beauty of your project and stuff, but it's the biggest grind. I much prefer like the construction part because, you're constantly doing things. This, I'm just running the sander back and forth and back and forth. Not very exciting, but absolutely necessary. Okay, off we go. So just a quick note as I move forward here, as I'm sanding, this is where I clean up those roundovers that we did. Let me show you on here. So on these roundovers, there are you'll see some edges right here. There's some edges over here. It's a little bit rougher because you're going from flat straight grain into end grain and stuff like that. So I usually take my time when I'm sanding, especially with my random orbital sander. And first of all, you need to stay very flat onto that profile. You do not want to tip because you don't want to change this roundover. You don't want to change that shape, but you need to come all the way up and follow that all the way around and smooth that out because the roundover does a nice job, but because it's cutting across that grain, it can tend to feel very rough. So you want to get that nice and smooth, clean off any lines here, any transitions lines, and just really make this a really smooth roundover. And so that's what you'll see me spending a little time just kind of slowly going over these roundovers and making sure that they look, you know, really nice and transition from one side to the other. Okay, so that's my run through with the 80. You notice I actually hit the bottom really quickly. I didn't spend a lot of time with the 80 grit on here. I don't want to change the flatness of this or anything, or grind down a corner or anything with it. So just a little bit with the 80 on there. Spend a little time up top just to make sure these transitions around the edge are nice and smooth. And you'll notice that all of the pencil mark is gone from all four sides. And I have really smooth transitions on those roundovers. And they feel much more, I don't know, organic now, if you will. So really I have a couple different options here. I can, because I have the 80 grit on there, I can move forward and do the other bases at the 80 grit that need 80 grit. And I can do all of those. I generally will do it like I'll spend all the time, instead of swapping out sandpaper, I'll just spend all the time, knock out all the 80 grit, then, you know, go from one base to the other, and then I'll switch grits to a 120, and then I'll do all the 120, and then I'll do all the 150 stuff, just to kind of keep things moving. But to keep the process more interesting for you all, instead of watching me sand with the same grit over and over and over again, I think I'm just going to progress through my grits on this one particular one. And then we will actually do a roundover and then do the final sand. So we'll take this one all the way to finish prep. How about that? As I said, the longest sanding operation is the coarsest grit, which was the 80. That usually takes the longest. You're knocking down a lot of the imperfections and getting rid of a lot of that, you know, any marks from the jointer or the planer or anything else on here, the saw marks or whatever. You're really taking care of all of that stuff with the 80 grit. So when you get to the 120 now, the whole purpose of the 120 is to start getting rid of all of the sanding marks from the 80. We've gotten rid of the imperfections in the wood from the other tools, but now we need to start smoothing it out so that we are getting down to smoother and smoother wood surfaces. So I'm going to take this 80 off. Well, actually, I took the 80 off already. And I'm going to grab my 120 from here. I have these already laid out in my grits that I'm going to use. So there's my 150, my 220, there's my 120. And line up the little holes on here. I keep thinking, you know, one of these days I'm going to replace this little orbital sander, this skill, but it just keeps working. So it's like I have a hard time getting rid of a tool that just works, right? So yeah, at least for now, just going to keep using this sucker. The only thing I might do, I mean, this is not exactly fresh sandpaper. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll either do one of two things. I'll take my vacuum hose and vacuum this out, or I just have a stiff brush and just brush out the surface just to get any clogs out of there and expose all that fresh stuff. So let's go ahead. I've got the side marked up with pencil again. And as I said, as you get through these grits, that pencil mark will come up easier and easier because the surface gets more and more smooth. But let's go ahead and do the 120. Okay, that is the 120. That feels really good. The other thing you can do with your stiff brush is just kind of sand the wood grain, and that kind of cleans any of that dust out of the pores as you're going. And make sure that you're just working with the fresh wood surface and not any wood sawdust clogging the pores and stuff there. I'm going to hit the bottom of this and the top really quickly with the with the 120 as well. So if you've been following along on this build, which you may not have been, I'm not sanding or worry about sanding the insides because I actually did those before we glued up the base, because that's the easiest time to be able to get a really good sanding done on those interior pieces. So they were final sanded. I think I sanded those to 150, which is more than adequate for what they need. But I did that before I glued these up. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing the pencil trick here. The other nice thing about doing the pencil on all four sides is it lets you know when you come around that you've already sanded that side. If there's no pencil there, you've already hit it. Because sometimes I lose track. I'm like, did I sand this side or not? Especially when they start getting really smooth, you kind of start losing track. All right, we are now up to 150 grit. All right, so now we've kind of entered into a place where I'm going to take a break from the sanding because I want to put a roundover, not like this big giant one. I want to do a nice edge breaking roundover. So I've got an 1/8 inch roundover bit that I like to use. And it just puts just a really tiny roundover on all of these sharp edges. I do it around the outside of the top, I do it around the inside of the top, and I do it around the outside of the bottom. And for the bottom, it gives it a nice shadow line when it's sitting flat on a table. You get this nice kind of like separation shadow line underneath there, but it also just lends itself to feeling really good in the hand. I don't do it before I sand, because if I did it before I started sanding, by the time I run through that 80 and 120 and 150, it'll actually flatten out that roundover because it's very subtle. So I usually wait till after I'm done with the 150, then I do the roundover, and that very slight roundover, then I can come back with the 120, and the 120 is not going to flatten out that roundover at all. So we need to move back over to our table over here. Let me move some stuff out of the way. And this is generally, like I said, this is why I usually will sand all the boxes at the same time and do everything kind of like each progressive grit at the same time, because of this step right here. So let me go back to this profile right here. I'm just going to set the computer off to the side for a minute. And I have to basically take this top off. And I should have my roundover bit here. I do. It's, like I said, I'll show you the bit. It's a very, very tiny, subtle little roundover. I don't know if you can even see that, but very small, and which is what I want. I want a very small, subtle. It just breaks the edge, makes it really smooth to touch, and is just, to me, it's like the perfect finishing touches to put on any sort of box. If you're making a jewelry box, or pretty much almost any project I do gets that roundover, because it just feels good. All right, I'm going to tighten this into the collet with my wrench here. Like I said, I don't go all the way to the bottom. I lift them up just, I don't know, not even 1/4 of an inch. All right, and I need a plate cover for that, which I think will be this one. So let's lower this down. I have to, just like I set the edge for doing the big roundovers, I set the edge on this the same way. So let me put this in. And then I have a block of wood here that has a nice flat edge. It's one of the ones we used a minute ago. And I'm going to do the same thing, where I'm just going to push this in, and it's going to hit the edge of that blade. You probably can't see that, but it's just hitting. Where can you see? There's the blade right there. So it's just hitting the edge of that. It's right here. And as I lower this down, I want it to just slip past that straight edge, just like that. So hitting the edge, sliding just past it. And that's going to give me, it's going to let it ride up into that roundover cut, or that roundover part of the blade, and give me a nice smooth cut all the way across. I do a test cut just to make sure it looks good. And let me get the computer out of the way, because I do not want to get all that dust in there. I need to move the power over. Now this blade can go at a higher RPM than the last blade, because it's a very small blade. Let's put the dust collection here. All right, so let's go ahead and do this really quickly. I think I got the camera set up here. We're in good shape. I'm going to do a test cut first. Let me get my ears on here. So let me show you exactly what that looks like. So here is that edge, and you can see it's just it just puts a little bit of a break on that, because here's a sharp edge right here. And you can see that I did both sides, and it just breaks it so gently. Feels really good in the hand. The nice thing is you don't have to have any supporting pieces or whatever. I've never had any chip out from this blade. It just does its thing. So. Oh. Okay, so a couple of things that you may note when I did that is that I did the bottom, right? So this has that nice profile on the bottom now. I also did the top edge, but I also do the inside. And the cool thing about when I do this is that because it has a bearing that rides along the inside, when it hits this triangular block in this corner here, it removes that cutting edge from here. So I get this really cool effect where that roundover is eased and you have straight corners and then back into it on this side of the triangle. So you get this little cool effect. I don't know if I can show you, but you get this cool effect right here where it kind of is going into it, it stops, and then it starts again right here and goes. So I think it just looks really cool, but it feels really nice. Now, because it does have that bit, that bearing that rides on the top of the bit, it can't fit inside of these recessed handles right here. So I have to ease these by hand, which means I usually grab like a piece of 120, like an older piece of 120 or something, and just kind of give it a fold up like this. And I come in and do those by hand. And all I do is, this stuff will be pretty easy because it's a fairly soft wood. So I'm not too worried about this. And it doesn't have to match the roundover profile. All it needs to do is just break that edge so that it doesn't feel sharp when you're grabbing the box. And it doesn't take a lot of extra work to do this, depending on the wood. Now, if I'm doing oak, it takes a little longer to break the edges on the oak just because it's a harder wood. But this is sycamore and it sands pretty easily. It's pretty soft as far as wood goes. I mean, it is a hardwood, but on the hardness scale, it does not rank up there with my oak or my walnut. But that's pretty much all I need, is just that little bit of easing right there. And that feels really good. Let me vacuum these out. Okay, and that is pretty much it. Now, not done with this, so I have to come back over to my sanding spot here, and got a question. You're going to ask how you dealt with the inside corners on the top. I don't. I actually leave these inside corners. I kind of like the way it looks because like I said, it eases right to the edge of that triangular block and then it's straight. So I leave it like that and I like the way it looks. It just kind of has a really cool effect to it. So, technically balsa is a hardwood. You are correct. Really, the definition of a hardwood is anything that loses its leaves in the fall and winter is a hardwood. Just kind of crazy. So yeah, all kinds of different species. Most people, you think of hardwood and they're thinking something like this, which is like, you know, super hard and but no. Now pine, softwood, pretty much anything that keeps its leaves or its needles or whatever is going to be your softwoods. Doesn't mean they're necessarily soft. My table is southern yellow pine right here. So this tabletop that I have, my workbench that I have is southern yellow pine, and it is hard as a rock. That's why I made it out of southern yellow pine. So just because it's a softwood doesn't mean it's soft, and just because it's a hardwood definitely doesn't mean it's hard. But as far as the hardwoods go, this one ranks pretty low on the Janka hardness scale, which is what most people use to determine exactly how hard a piece of wood is, like a mahogany or something. I did a whole bunch of boards with like sapele and stuff. That stuff is super dense and super hard. Redwood, obviously the same thing. They rank pretty high on the Janka hardness scale. Last thing I'm going to do on this one is hit it with a 220, and that will finish off this particular base. Like I said, these are easier because they don't have the side compartment and stuff. I don't have to worry about them. The only thing I'm going to have to do after that is put a finish on this, and I think these are going to get a tung oil finish on them, just so you can really appreciate the crazy grain that you get from quarter sawing sycamore. I remember first time I saw sycamore, I was like, I had no idea what it was. It was in the side of a drawer from a piece of furniture from like 1962, and I was like, what in the world is that wood? Because it had this cool lattice structure and everything, and I was like, what is that? And I did some research, and I was like, oh, that's sycamore, but it's quarter sawn sycamore. And so when I was at my my wood guy, he had a bunch of this stuff, and I was like, oh, I got to try that. So that's why I've got this stuff. Now finishing it, I haven't found a finish that I love for it yet. So still working on that. But anyway, let's get the pencil out. Let's do our final pencil marks on here. And get this sanded down to its final grit. I think that's probably good. I'm going to do this top too because I want this to be pretty smooth. Okay, final sanding on here. I need to do some other stuff here. Hang on, I need to hook up my power and my dust collection, all that good stuff. Okay, we're good to go. Last grit for this particular one. The last thing I do once I get all of those edges done with the 220 is I'll take an older piece of 220 and just kind of fold it up. And then I just kind of go back over those edges that I did the roundover on, just to make sure that I didn't flatten them out. And I just give them a little once over with that 220, especially on the corners here, because sometimes the roundover doesn't quite, just if the corners aren't perfectly flat when it goes into that roundover bit, doesn't quite give me the roundover profile I want there. But a little easing with the sandpaper when you're done, like this, just to kind of make sure everything's cleaned up. And that is perfect. I might hit these inside ones just a little bit, but not much. I'm really lightly doing this. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on here. I'm just making sure that anything that may have gotten flattened a little bit by that 220 is now perfectly good. The other thing you can do is, if you want to make sure you don't have any 220 swirl marks, is take the last grit that you sanded with, like I did a 220, and just lightly sand across the top with the grain like this. And that ensures that, you know, if there are any marks left from that 220, they're going with the grain and they're very hard to see. So that's a really easy way to just kind of finish off your sanding, is take that last grit that you used and just go with the grain. This stuff's so weird though. It doesn't have a lot of grain direction sometimes. But, I mean, that's super glassy smooth now. And I think, yeah. So that's pretty much it for this. This edge right here, I want to fix this one. It didn't quite get the roundover I wanted, so I'm going to spend just a little extra time on it. I mean, now's the time to really kind of make sure that all of your edges and everything look good, because once you start putting finish on it, you're kind of at that point of no return. So I want to make sure there's no lines or anything in these edges, no sharp, crisp edges or anything like that. Because this is really your last chance to give it the little profile that you want for those edges and stuff. And I can tell you that once you start putting any sort of finish on, all these things pop out. You can see any imperfections, you will find them when you start putting finish on. So now is the time to really make sure that you're not going to have any imperfections. And also, I will tell you this, just from my experience, is that you want to, don't shortcut the sanding process. Because if there's anything you will regret more, it's not going all the way like you should with the sanding process, because you'll see imperfections pop out all over the place when you start putting finish on there, especially if you're doing any sort of a dye or anything. Like if you go, oh, I'm just going to do a 150 grit, I'm not going to do a 120, or I'm not going to do an 80, a 150 is fine. And trust me, you'll see all kinds of, you'll see saw marks, you'll see planer marks. You really need to start with a heavy grit and work your way to a fine grit, and don't skip grits. Go between, because it'll look perfect when you're in this not finished stage, when you haven't put any stain on it. And the minute you go and put stain on there, every little imperfection that you didn't get sanded out will pop out, and it will bug the crap out of you for the rest of your days. Or at least as long as you have to look at it. So that's my advice. So I mean, even though it's like I said, for me, it's now, here's the thing. If I'm going to be sanding, I'm going to put my Bluetooth headphones on, I'm going to put some music on, and I'm just going to start sanding. Because it's just easier to sit there and get the groove going, and, you know. But but I'm not going to skip any steps. I'm going to do every single one. And the other thing is, I'll pull out some fresh paper about halfway through. I keep the paper cleaned out, but keep track of your sandpaper too, because even if you're like a 120 or something, or a 150, it gets clogged, and then you're really not sanding with a 120 or 150 anymore. Now you've got like a 180 or 220, you're not really removing the previous scuff marks, you're just kind of flattening them and they'll still show up. So make sure you clean your sandpaper out. Use a stiff brush on it, works pretty well. You can use your vacuum hose and vacuum out the sandpaper, that works really well, or a combination of both, but just clean them every now and then. Don't just keep moving from board to board to board and not clean off the surface of your sandpaper, because it will get clogged and you won't get the effectiveness out of the grit that you're, that's the whole reason you're using it. So what time is it? It is a little after 1. We did some good work today. I'm not going to make you watch me do all this again, because I'm basically going to repeat this process that I just did on here. I'm going to repeat that 7 more times, because that's how many more of these I have to go. So I'm going to go and sand starting on the white oak, or the red oak, and the other sycamore. I'll start at the 80 grit. On the walnut and the one cherry that I have, I'll probably start at 120, because those are smoother to start with. But these are a little bit more coarse in their grain structure, because they are quarter sawn. That grain structure is a little bit more coarse, and so I really wanted that 120 to get all those marks out of there, or that 80, I mean, before I moved to the 120. And then I had a smoother surface to start with the 120, because I prepped it with that 80. If it's really bad, I've seen people start at 60. 60 to me is just a little too coarse. It puts some really heavy, I mean, unless you're really trying to change the profile of a piece of wood, I think 60's too much for most of my projects. I don't use it. Now, the only time I use 60 is on my, I've got a handheld disc sander, and I will use that for doing like profiles in a guitar body. I have one here. Do I have one I could show you? I think I do. So yeah, so like this one right here. Basically, I use a 60 grit to get this belly cut on here. So you can see that there is a nice profile. There you go, that's a good view. There's a profile right here, and I did this with an angle grinder with a 60 grit sandpaper pad on it. And the angle grinder with that 60 grit works really well. But I mean, it's aggressive and it removes a lot of wood, which is why I say I don't use 60 grit on my flat work projects. But on here, where I needed to remove that, it worked out really well. Same thing over here. There's an arm bevel on this side, and that bevel, I use the angle grinder with that 40 grit on there, and it does, or with the 60 grit. And it does a really great job at that, but I wouldn't want to use that on a flat project just because it is so aggressive and it does remove a lot of wood. Did I do one on here? Yeah, so let me show you this one. So this is a very burly piece of ash, and I actually used a 40 grit on this one to do the belly carve on here, because this is such a hard wood. I mean, I know there's guys who have jigs that they cut these things on their bandsaws and stuff. I don't have that. So I started with a 40 grit on the angle grinder, then moved to a 60, and then smoothed it with other sandpapers. And the same thing on here. You can see there's a bevel arm cut on this part of the body right here. So anyway, nice little telly style. One day I'll get around to finishing these. But anyway, that's where I use the more coarse sandpaper. I don't use coarse sandpaper on, I need to do one on this one. This one hasn't had a carve done on there, but this is kind of cool. This is a different style. Anyway, but that's where I do the 60 grit. I think 80 grit is pretty much as coarse as I would use to, like I said, I'm removing saw marks and blade marks from a planer or a jointer or whatever. So 80 grit works really well. From the 80, I go to the 120, 150. Some people go to a 180. I skip from 150 to 220, and I don't see any harm in that. So it just depends on your process. But use 60 on slab coffee table. Yeah, so that's another thing is if you're working with slabs and if you flattened a board, like I've got a router sled that's, you probably can't see it, it's sitting behind me. It sits behind me over there. There's a router sled. You can just see the top of it right there is my router sled. And I use that for flattening slabs, and I use a large flattening bit in my router, and it makes passes across the top. And so, yeah, getting those out, I usually have I use this, and I put a very aggressive grit on there, like a belt sander with a 40 or a 60 on slabs, because of the little teeny, every pass, I mean, it's flat, but there's these little teeny marks all the way across it from where the router bit goes back and forth. So yeah, I definitely agree. Using the coarse bits for that stuff. I've got a cherry slab over in the corner over here that actually has that. Well, you know what? I've got a couple minutes before I go anywhere. Let me drag my cherry slab out here. I really need to do something with it. I flattened it. I need to turn it into a table. It needs some stuff before it's done, but it's really pretty. Oh, bring this slab over here so you can see. Hopefully, you'll see what I'm talking about. Let me move this out of the way, and I'll pop it up here. So it's a heavy slab, even though it's been flattened. There we go. Of course, I hit the button on my remote. All right, so you can see this slab has been flattened. This is a very large cherry slab. But if you'll notice, there's these vertical lines all up and down. That came from the router bit that I used to flatten this out. I think I got this down to about, it's like 1.5 inches thick. So for thickness wise, it's great for a tabletop, which is what it's going to be. I have to put some butterflies in here and such, just to keep these from separating. It's a beautiful crotch here, nice figured crotch. It's got the little feather figuring going up through here. It's a beautiful piece of wood. I've had it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I'll turn to this side and you can see, but you can see all those vertical lines in there. The easiest way to get rid of all these vertical lines is start with a belt sander with like a 60 grit paper, maybe a 40 to 60, and just start flattening. And the nice part about the belt sander is that you can actually run it with the grain and get those scratch marks going with the grain direction, which are not as noticeable or difficult to remove. And then once you get it super flat, you can start going to a circular, oscillating type sander and start using an 80 grit and stuff. But definitely something like this, like you said, with your slab coffee table or whatever, I always use a heavier grit because there's those little marks that if you don't, they're just always there. You'll always see them, even if you think they're gone. When you shine the light in a certain direction, they're not gone. So, yep, there's definitely a place and a time for coarse sandpaper. That is for certain. Let me put this back over in the side here where it lives. One day I'll get to you, little cherry slab, I promise. Cool thing about the cherry slab is that as it ages, the wood just kind of gets darker and even better looking. So I don't have a problem with that. I still have bark on there too. I need to take the bark off the edge. But you don't have a belt sander. Well, let me tell you, I barely have a belt sander. This is a Black & Decker. Probably like a, I don't know, a Walmart special or something. It's not very expensive. I probably could do with a better one. I would like to have a Triton. They make a really nice, like a 4-inch wide monster thing for doing slabs and stuff would be great. Yes, thank you. That is a very lovely chunk of cherry. I saw that at my hardwood dealer. He had a whole stack of them because they'd taken the log and sliced it. And I'm like, oh, how much for that? And so he cut me a deal on it. think I paid 150 bucks for that slab. For a crotch slab that large, it was a pretty good deal. So I jumped all over that. I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but I'll take it. And then I had my sled out doing a slab project for a friend. And I went ahead and said, well, as long as I got it set up, I might as well flatten that. So I flattened that. I still haven't figured out what I'm going to do with it. I'm probably going to make some walnut, some heavy walnut legs for it, like kind of come down, and I haven't figured it out yet. But at some point in time, I'll put some legs on there. I'll finish it and maybe sell it. I don't know. It was one of those pieces of wood where I didn't have a purpose for it, but I had to have it just because it was this beautiful slab. So sometimes the wood just calls you. But speaking of the wood calling me, I think I'm going to run down to my hardwood dealer tomorrow, and because I am out of wood pretty much. I have like a lot of little pieces, but I don't have anything project worthy. So I might make a run down. I'll check the weather and make a run down to my hardwood dealer. It's about 45 minutes to an hour each way, depending on traffic. But I might go down there, and if I do, I will take a camera with me and just make some videos of, you know, what it looks like when you go to if you've never been to a hardwood dealer. At least the ones I've been to, they all kind of look the same. So I will show you what they look like on the interior, how I can kind of fish through and look at the different species and what all that rough cut stuff looks like and everything else. So I will do a short video and then put that up on my stream as well. But I think I'm going to do that tomorrow. I've kind of had that on the plan because I have, like I said, I have no wood. I have lots of stuff for my burn barrel, but I have nothing to make projects out of. So I'm also going to work on getting all of these flattened, not flattened, but sanded, and get the edges done and get them all ready for finish. I'm going to try to figure out what finish I'm going to use. I might do some more testing, like, you know, testing that I did with, you know, different sample blocks and stuff. I might do some more testing if I can get some medium brown stain to try over that golden maple dye stain, because I think that's my best prospect for the oak. The other stuff, the cherry is already good. I know what I'm going to do for the cherry. It just gets the Kona stain, and the walnut gets a Danish oil. So that's pretty simple. I just love the look of oil on walnut. You can't get any better than that. So yes, some wood is too good to pass up. That is my philosophy, because as my bumper sticker says, wood is good. All right, I think I'm gonna put a pin in it for the day. It's about lunchtime. I'll get back here this afternoon, do some more sanding and stuff, but it's the same as you've already seen, so there's no sense in showing you more. And then I will be back here on Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So depending on where you are, I have no idea what time that would be. If you're in the UK, that's about, what is that, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. So anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Hey, thanks for coming in. Wobble Penguin's here. Free Fall Clash was here. I got to get more people popping in and talking on like Facebook and YouTube, because everybody on Twitch is awesome, and I think that's just the way the community is there. But thanks for stopping in. I appreciate you all popping in, and I will be back here on Wednesday. So have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys then.